1 minute.
Avantika, that clock looks like a halo around you.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Okay, we are now YouTube live now.
Okay, so I'll just say a few lines, introduce. So good morning, Selamat Pagi, everyone. And I welcome everyone to the Zoom session today. And the topic of today's session is Introduction to Photography and Birding for Beginners. And this session has been organized by Jawaharlal Nehru Indian Culture Center, Jakarta. And today to conduct the session, we have among us Mr. Arun Samak, who is an enthusiastic bird watcher and turned bird watching into a very serious hobby over the years. And some of his notable trips have been to foothills of Himalayas, hills in Thailand, Malaysia, Kalimantan in Indonesia. And today he is going to share his experience with us and also give us an insight in about bird watching and introduction to photography. So I would like to welcome Mr. Arun Samak to the session, and I would request him to say a few lines to introduce himself and go ahead with the session. I welcome you, Mr. Samak.
Thank you, Ms. Avantika. Thank you very much. Selamat pagi, selamat siang. I see a lot of familiar names around, and I see Mr. Upin sir from SKS is here. Ms. Kusuma, I humbly and I'm grateful for this opportunity from JNICC, and thank you very much. I'm honored and I'm pleased to be here and spending an hour sharing some of the little I have learned, and more than happy to take questions. Just a quick introduction. Myself, Arun Samak. I hail from a state called Karnataka in India and a place called Sagar, which is where the biggest waterfall, Juk Jalpath, is there. I've lived across many countries, and I was fortunate, and I was really, really fortunate to be in Indonesia for a considerable amount of time, nearly 7-8 years, and I made some amazing friends and for life, and I still have them as my friends. Coming back to, I've been doing photography for nearly 10 years, and I consider myself more a birder because I love birding. And as I get through the presentation, I'll be talking about some of my journey and some of my work, and I'll be more than happy to take questions. Ms. Avantika, I need small favor. If there are any questions, people can leave it in the message box, and then you can help me consolidate so we can respond to them later at the end. Yeah.
Sure, Mr. Samak.
Right. So, Pak Aziz, I need access to the presentation. It says host disabled the participant screen sharing.
Okay.
So yeah.
Granted, sir. Already granted.
Thank you. I am here. Okay. Yes. Again, it says failed. I'll try again. Okay. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Right. So once again, I welcome everybody. Selamat pagi and selamat sore. I'm told after 11, you can say selamat siang in Indonesia, right? And sore is in the evening. So I'll be in English. My bahasa is broken. Only Pak Aziz can understand that. So I'll stick to English, and then happy to take questions as we go along or at the end, possibly, right? Okay. So I'll be covering some quick introduction to photography, and I'll try and talk about some of the genres in photography and what are the types of photography out there. I'll try and do a bit of a deep dive into bird photography. Then I'll try and see if I can summarize a bit, and if possible, we'll keep about 5-10 minutes at the end for questions. So just, everybody says photography, and it's a word which sometimes is misused also. But I wanted to start with a basic definition of what is photography. So photography is an art, and it can be anything. And some people look at some photography as being extremely good, and some others feel, oh, what is this? I don't understand at all. So like in the art form also, it's very difficult to appreciate unless you understand the subject. And in photography, the very critical piece is that you're doing the art using the light. Basically, you're using the light, and then using your camera. In the past, it used to be film cameras, and now it is digital cameras. So using the digital cameras, you actually take pictures. Wiki has a very interesting long definition about what is photography is. It's an art and application, and the image is created by recording the light on a film, and the film is like a sensor, which in the digital world. So it's a very unique thing that you actually do. Photography means you actually are trying to use the light to create some piece of work, and the piece of work is an image, right? So moving on, so in the basics of photography, and basics for a simple good image, right? I consider 4 components to it in terms of how do you use the composition, or how does the image look, and what are the key things. That's very, very important. I think even before getting into any genre of photography, being wildlife or being landscape or being astro, I think understanding composition is pretty critical. Moving on from there is exposure, and I'll talk about that in detail as well. The exposure is how you actually expose the senses to the light to actually capture the image you would like to take. The lens plays a very critical role in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And then finally, and the most important, is how do you get the light into the sensor. So those are the 3-4 things I consider as critical for understanding for a critical good image to be taken. Just talk about composition. Is my voice okay, Avansika? Is that okay? Yeah.
It's good.
Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. So I'll just keep going. So in the composition, we just talked about most of the time rules and principles around how the photography is done, and simplify. So it's, many a time we try and complicate an image, many a time we try and do lots of different things, but try and keep it as simple as possible. Try and convey a story through that, and make sure that it is simple enough for the audience to understand, right? And then most of the time when it comes to, especially into wildlife, the understanding the rule of third is another important thing. And then there are other rules about make sure that you fill the frame and you don't cut off the subject. Like sometimes you have an animal and you don't have the leg, or sometimes you have somebody and then you don't have legs or hands, and don't chop off. Or there is a building and you don't cut off the top of the building. So lots of rules around not to do, basically. And then also there are rules around how do you use lines, and how does it appeal to individuals, where does the line lead to, and then how do you get your focus right, and what background do you need to have so that the image looks good, and make sure that the subject stands out. And sometimes you also look at some of the monuments or the buildings, and then you look at symmetries and patterns and the pillars and stuff like that. So there's lots of rules around compositions. There are many more. If you Google composition, you will get tons and tons in the Google for sure. I picked up the 8 which I felt the most, which I used the most. So these are some of the 8 ones I believe are important. What I'm going to do is try and unravel the first 2, obviously because of lack of time. I'll try and simplify, bring it down to what does simplify means and what does understanding the rule of third means. So simplify means sometimes the image is cluttered and you want an image of some person or an animal, but you have a lot of things around it. So try and eliminate that. So you need to isolate your subject and make sure that you have got the right image there. Many a time you need to zoom in. If you have a good zoom lens, you can zoom in or walk closer to the subject. So don't have too many things around you which will distract the viewer or the image get distracted. Many a time we take pictures, but the focus is on something else and the subject is out of focus. So try and critically focus on the subject. So if it is again a portrait of a person, make sure that the person is in the focus and the background and the people around it can be defocused. You need to have a location which reflects a subject, right? So for example, if you are putting a drummer or if you're putting a portrait of a person or a priest, you probably would want a background to be a temple or a church or a mosque. So depending on how do you actually get that, and if you are trying to shoot an animal or a bird, obviously the background should be be preferred to be green. If sometimes you don't get green, then you get a blue sky. So make sure that the subject is around the location which reflects that what personality it is and what you want to express, right? It's not just take a picture and okay, I've got a picture, and then later you look back at it and you don't really realize that, okay, you realize that it's not what it is conveying what it needs to be. So, there is some definition, as a photograph is a subject, a context, and a story. So you need to have a story around it, right? So I'll try and talk about what the story does. So you need to have a story, a big park where a monk walking. So that kind of a story you want to create. And so these are the first rule. So if you put that into practice, right? So I said simplify, right? So many a times we are lazy enough and we stand and take a picture of even, a bird. This is a captive bird, I think. It's a swan. And the lady in the first picture is taking the picture standing up. And you can see, I don't know whether you can see my cursor, the bottom is the outcome of that first picture, right? And if you see that you don't get to see the bird, it's from the top and it doesn't give you a point of view at all. It's a poor point of view. So I would simply say, just kneel down and then try and get the bird or an animal or anything to your eye level. And that's what has happened in the second image where the bird is visible. Now you don't see the clutter. And also you can see that the person is zoomed in a bit so that the subject is visible clearly, right? I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. Sometimes it's not easy to go close to the bird like this. As I said, it's probably a captive bird, so you probably do. Now, point of view can be different, right? So how do you bring some story to it, and how do you bring some life into it, right? So I looked at this and I said, okay, many a times we try and go for wildlife, especially we call it eye level. We try and get down to our knee, or we in fact even flat lay down so we can shoot at the ground level. But that's not true for all of the genres of photography. So if you look at the second image, the image probably stands out with somebody trying to jump and basketball, and then you have a perspective. If you can, try and get it up from there, or if you can't go up, can you go to the side and do something? Similarly, to give it, like this image, obviously I took it from, all of these are from Google. I'm not there yet for my images, but the boy is actually saluting and he's got a flag. And to give that magnanimity to that flag and to the whole gesture, you probably want to go closer and give that feel of the sky and vastness of that country, or the job he's trying to do. So there are kind of different things you could do to get your composition right. So now I talk about wildlife, and this was shot in I think one of the 1,000 islands I recall when I was there. So I saw this little further.
Komodo?
Yeah, this is not a Komodo. This is a whatever the dragon. It's one of the lizards. This is not actually a monitor lizard actually. So the monitor lizards are not dangerous, so you can kneel down. So I kneel down on my ground. So I'm on the ground. You can see that the ground is completely defocused. The sea behind is defocused, and I've got the animal in move. And I've made sure that, I've got the subject in focus. I can see the eyes and the glitter in the eyes. And that's how you try and get a composition of a better. So this applies many a times into the wildlife, right? Most of the time we prefer to go down and then look at. Now, the second rule is rule of third. I'll show you some examples as we go through. So place the subject in 1/3 of the frame if possible. And that's a rule which works predominantly for wildlife and especially for birding. And it gives you a perspective of, and it's true for many other subject genres of the photography as well. The 1/3 can be either left side or right side or the top or the bottom, depending on what you want to convey. And try and keep the space, open space in front. And that's the next rule, which talks about anything behind the subject is negative space. So cut that off. If you can crop it off, right? And then if you want to get an extra visual effect, again, I talked about try and go tighter to the frame, right? So this is, again, I can illustrate this with, so this is a dhole and wild dog. And the wild dog actually had hunted down a deer. There was a pack of them. I had to isolate. So I was looking for one which is isolated. So this came out isolated. And if you can notice that I have framed it in such a way that the animal is in the left and the space is in the right and the top. And what it does is it gives the feeling that the animal is ready to walk off, that the dhole is ready to walk. Just as it was walking, it just gave me a stare, like don't come close to me, because these animals are hunters. They have canines, which are really, really powerful. Similar example is this. This is Chinkara. This was shot in Big One in Maharashtra in India. The previous one was shot in Kabini in Bangalore, near Mysore, the Nagarhole Palace. So this Chinkara has got one male, and I think it's a juvenile female at the back. So they were looking at me, and I had to make sure that I have a bit of a foreground, which is green, and I have vast background, but I had to compose it as a composition. I had to compose it in such a way that it is on the right extreme. So I have enough space in the front. Now, again, the rule of third works here, and it gives you a feeling that it could have been in the middle. The animals could have been in the middle, but I personally think, and if you try and understand more about photography and look at more and more images, you'll probably appreciate that this is how most of the compositions are done, where the rule of 1/3 is used. So typically I would have probably put the animal a little more lower, but I wanted a bit of green foreground. So it kind of gives me a bit of a feel of the fact that it is in a greenery, and then there is a vast background at the back. I have blurred out everything at the back, which is the tree and the green grassland and everything else, just so that the animal is standing out. Even the sand and the stones behind are all actually defocused. So that's about composition. So of the cell, we talked about Sina. There is, as I said, there's plenty of things we can do with compositions, and I'm trying to, within this 1 hour, try and give you a flavor of this. So the most important, and I think the only thing which matters in photography to get a good picture is exposure. Now, what does exposure mean? And exposure is actually a combination of three things. It's a triangle. You have aperture, you have a shutter, and you have an ISO. Now, these are the core elements. And the reason they are put in a triangle, at least I try to put it in a triangle, and that's how most of the photographers call it, as the triangle of a core element, is because if you change one of these, the others change. And if you pull one up, the triangle shape changes, like the way, in a triangle you pull without changing the length. So basically, aperture is what it represents your eye, basically, like the way the eye is. The more you open the eye, the more light comes in. The more further you want to see, the furthest you want to see, you make your eyes smaller. And the moment you make it smaller, you get to see further things. That's exactly the way the camera aperture works. I have some more examples I can take you through. depending on how much the aperture is open, the light falls into the sensor. Now, the more the light, the better it is, but not necessarily always. Sometimes you want to get a different image. So the aperture plays a very, very, very critical role in taking a good picture. Now, aperture is referred in F numbers, and that's how they're always referred as. And for whatever strange reason, it's been, ever since the invention of cameras, it's always been the smallest number is the biggest aperture. And the definition of biggest aperture is the circle you see is your eye, let's say. The bigger the eye, the more light comes in. And then the smaller the the eye, which means the F number is bigger. So it's a bit tricky, it's confusing for somebody who wants to understand. But if somebody says stop down, which means you're going from F2 to F2.8, that's what is stop down means. And step up means you come back towards the. So the key thing is in most of the digital cameras, I am assuming most of us carry, and even in these world, the digital cameras which are in your mobile phones also carry these aperture. You've noticed probably you can change the aperture, right? But some would not know what does it do, but then by looking at this, you can figure out what it is doing. Then the next most important element is the shutter. The shutter is the time it allows the light to come before the sensor closes it. So which means the sensor opens up, the light lets in, and then the sensor is closed. And that's the shutter which does. These days, you've got absolutely mirrorless cameras, which means there are no physical shutters. They're all digital. But irrespective the technology, how it has changed, the concept doesn't change at all. The shutter remains the shutter. So for example, in our phones, Android phone or an iPhone or any other phone, you can see the shutter moving, but it's all digital. There is no physical movement. So in DSLR, you have two types of DSLR. One is the one which has mirror as in there is physical movement of the thing, and there is mirrorless. And those are the ones which differentiate in terms of the speed and the noise levels of the cameras as well. Now, this is a little more complex, the ISO. It in fact stands for International Standard Organization. That's about it. There's no other meaning behind it. This is the measure of the sensitivity of the lens or the processor. In the past, it used to be a film, and the film would get the light, and the amount of light which falls on the film based on the chemicals it used, it would record the image. Now, in a digital camera, this is performed by the processor, and what this processor do is it just simply becomes more sensitive to light, which means the moment a little light comes in, it will capture that detail. So which means the ISO is just the opposite of aperture, which is the smaller ISO means less sensitive, the higher ISO means more sensitive. Now, if you realize between these three, if you have a big aperture, which is, let's say you're shooting with a good lens, and the lens actually carries the aperture. So the big lens, which is f2, and the fast shutter 1/1000, 1/2000, which means within 1/1000th of a second, you're taking a picture. And then the sensitivity of the frame actually matters. So that how much it gets recorded. And if the sensitivity is higher and higher, you actually generate something called noise. And noise is basically grains or the dots which you get in the camera. So when you sometimes zoom in with your camera, again, be it your mobile phone or a digital camera, you see there are a lot of dots. And those dots are generated because of lack of light. And then the sensor is not able to capture a sharp image, right? Now, just to understand, I think the most important thing is aperture. So I'll try and explain aperture. As you can see, the bigger the aperture, the number is smaller. The smaller, the bigger the number, the smaller the aperture. As the light falls through, it falls on the sensor on the right side, and then it gets captured. And if you were to take this image, which I'm showing you now, this is taken with a very wide aperture. Why? Because the subject is the only thing which is visible, and everything else is defocused. So also what happens in when the aperture is fully open is it ends up focusing on a very small, narrow of focus. So which means it will focus on a portrait, only the person or a bird or an animal. In this case, the person who is in the flight. But it also allows you to take more light. So it takes the image faster. And as the aperture drops, as in here, the light also falls into the wider area. So you can see that the light is restricted, and then the sensor gets lesser light. So this is how the aperture works. The aperture is a number, as I said, in your digital camera. Hold on. Let me move from this. Okay. So to give you what does an aperture do, and a concept called depth of field, which I'm not going to go into, but just in a layman's land, if you were standing here and taking a picture and your aperture is big, f2, only this cat is in focus, everything else is out of focus, typically. But the moment you drop down your aperture from f2 to f8, f9, f10, or f11, the image becomes visible, or the entire landscape is in the focus. So this is how the aperture works. Aperture is very, very important. I would recommend everybody to play around with aperture and then take lots and lots of images. And then, as you know, in the digital world, you can delete them if they're not good. So you'll understand how this works, right? So I wanted to stick to these two because there are so many other things you can talk about. So the shutter is just a shutter, the speed at which you can gain the shutter speed. The higher the aperture, which is f2, f1.8, you get more shutters. And the lower the aperture, you get smaller shutters. And similarly, ISO, higher the ISO, you get higher shutters, and lower the ISO, you get lower shutter. It's just a triangle which works all the time. If I were to just get into, I'm just conscious of time as well. So I'm thinking of I'll try and be slightly faster. Hopefully it's okay with you all. So I've got genres of photography, and there's like tons of them, right? And one doesn't know what is that person's interest. I didn't know where my interest was until I shot a fair bit. I had a film camera called Pentax, and I used it for a variety of reasons. I shot events. I went to my friend's place. I shot a lot of things, but I never knew what was my real interest was until I actually got this. Then in the genres, obviously you have wildlife. Within wildlife, you have, you've got birds, you've got animals, you've got, even underwater, animals are also there. So there's plenty of wildlife out there. Landscape is landscape. You take a picture of a big mountain. The one which I'm sitting here, the background is a landscape picture. Astro is a very, very interesting photography where you actually take the pictures of, the star trails or the entire sky and then the galaxies. And so a lot of that, right? So that's sports, action. Typically people go and become, like sports photographer, like cricket or soccer or a badminton or tennis. Those are all action photography, and the skill required in each of these are very different. And you will understand if you were to go into each one of them, it makes each one of them is an ocean by itself in terms of what one needs to learn. Portrait is individuals. Macro is an 1:1, which means you take picture of a small ant or a mosquito or whatever, or even a flower, and then blow it up to a life size. And that is a very different, type of photography one does. Architectural, people shoot buildings and they get, excited with what is all there. Even wedding and event photography is an interesting one. You have artificial lights there, so you can use your own extra light. So this becomes an interesting, world as well. And then finally, fashion photography, which is gaining momentum, where people do, their own albums and their own, also go into fashion events and stuff like that. There are many, many more genres one can think of, but I thought these are like the top ones, which I'm going to go a little more into the wildlife photography because that's what gave me solace. And why did wildlife give me solace was simply because one, I was always expected to be in the forest, and that itself is an amazing thing, that you're in the nature, you're amongst something which is very, very nice. And second is birding. Why did I choose birding? It's because birding is most difficult one. I'm not saying the other forms are not difficult, but birding is most difficult because birds are very skittish, they're very fast. You need to have fast fingers, and it's a challenging subject to shoot. So I thought, let me choose that. So I ended up becoming a birder. I also had a couple of friends who helped me with that. There are quite a few good birders in Indonesia. There are some guides are also, birding guides are there. If any of you are interested in getting into birding, please let me know. I'll connect you with them. And then there are some amazing birders. I know a person by name Caleb Jordan. He is an amazing birder. He also does photography, but he loves birding and he walks around. He takes people along. He's helped me go around a lot of places in Indonesia. So just to get into bird photography, what is bird photography is, again, I'll try and get the images quickly. So it is important to understand at what time of the day you do birding. And you don't do birding throughout the day. You can't, because the light is very, very harsh at this time of where you are in Jakarta now, which is 11:30. So you need to select if it is light, which is in the early morning. So we typically have early mornings, which is 6 to 8:39 is the timing when we bird. And in the afternoon, which is like 4:30 to 6 or 3:30 or 4 to 6. So which is, we call it golden light, blue light, where the light is colorful, which has got a little more tinge to it. And it has some interesting elements to it. And then we'll talk about how does the light play at that time of the day. And then you need to understand behavior of the bird. Again, I'll try and explain that as we go in some of the images. You need to know what does a specific bird, what behavior does it have? You need to know their migration path if you want to capture some of the birds which are migrating, because you can't go to every place, but sometimes they do migrate. A lot of birds migrate via Indonesia as well. So if you want to know that, that will be great. Then you can shoot them. Also important to know conservation status, which is it threatened? Is it okay? Is not okay? Because there are a lot of birds in threatened stage, and especially in Indonesia, because it has a lot of endemic birds. Endemic means only available in that place. However, there is a lot of caging, a lot of selling, a lot of eating. So the bird population in Indonesia is coming down, and that's a big, big challenge. So conservation is very, very important. Everything we talked about composition in the first section of my presentation applies here. Again, eye level, background, habitat, and story is critical. Identification of the bird is another interesting challenge. You will be amazed as we go through this. And then finally, a bit of technology in terms of how do you process them. Just to give you this was shot in Muara Angke. This is a straighted heron, and it has got a fish. I think one of those fish, I don't know the name of the fish, but it caught this fish, and we were there at about 6:30 or 6:45 in a boat. This is wife and I think we were in that boat. And you can imagine that's the time they come out and they feed themselves. So you've got great opportunity because you've got the light, you've got the activity happening, and there is a story behind it. Now, the story is obviously, it's eating its food. If you notice, I've used a 1/3 rule here, which means I've placed the subject at the left extreme corner. I wanted to get the reflection, but it was not possible. So I chose not to get the reflection. But then I wanted to get the bird clear and also the fish clear. So if you were to look at this photo, you don't need to do a lot of work because the light is good. It's almost backlit. the light is not falling straight on the bird. It's coming from a side or a side lid. So even the fish is visible, and I managed to make this image. So the lighting plays a very, very critical role. So I would, if anybody were to do birding, I would recommend them to get up early in the morning. If you want to be in Muaranke at 6 o'clock, you better be up at 4:35 and drive down 45 minutes a day. So you have to be there by 6. So most of my days, whenever I'm doing birding, starts early morning. I start at 3 a.m. or so, right? So that's the first part of the lighting. The second part of the lighting is golden light. As I said, this is a golden-headed cisticola. This was shot in Jakarta Bay, again in the golden light at 6:30 in the morning. This is a very tiny bird, and you can't really recognize many times because it camouflages well. But to our luck, and thanks to the digital cameras, I have a big lens. So I managed to catch this, and you can see the light on the grass is also very nice, and also light on the bird is nice. This is really the image has got the light was behind me, which means it was falling on the subject. So the light plays a very, very critical role when you are doing birding, and that it determines the quality of image, the sharpness of image, and also the outcome. And if you notice in this bird, there are no shades. There is no shade on the bird, right? So you don't want a shade because you want all parts of the bird to be visible. We are able to see the legs, you are able to see the beak, and also the tail, and a nice, a grass. This is a tall grass, which is like 3-4 feet tall grass. So we managed to do that. Again, back to my earlier composition topic, I made sure that only the bird is in focus. A bit of grass is also in the focus, but the entire background is defocused. So it's all grass actually. The exact everything is in the background is grass again, right? Now, light also doesn't mean you have natural light all the time, and then sometimes you have to innovate, and you have to do things which are very different. Now, this you will be surprised to note that this was shot at 10 p.m. and this is on the road. This is a road which is sleeping. This is called Indian nightjar, and we had driven that road in about 7 p.m. and we knew that that bird was sitting there. It flew away. So now I know the behavior of the bird. Now the behavior of a nightjar is that it will come back and sit exactly in the same position once the threat is gone. So I need to know the behavior. So I knew the behavior. So I said, okay, you know what? We will have dinner. That bird will be sitting there throughout the night. Even if it has a feed, it'll take the feed, bring back here and eat it. So what we did is we went back to this place in the car. We parked the car about 20-30 feet away. We knew that the bird is there. And then we used the diffused light of the car, which means we parked the car in an angle where there was a little light. This was shot at a very, very high ISO, 14,400 ISO, with a very low shutter. So what it does is this gives you an idea that the image doesn't necessarily need to be in the day or the evening. Sometimes you get images like in the night also. There are nocturnal birds. You need to shoot nocturnal birds also. I have shot. This is a nocturnal bird. It flies around. This is no different to an owl basically. So it feeds in the night. So this just to give you perspective of a good light versus no light, but you can still, with your digital image, you can still do a lot of quality work, and you can get still a sharp image. But yeah, one need to struggle a bit if there is no light. Now coming into migration. So again, this is another very critical element. You need to know the timelines when they migrate. You need to know what are the routes they migrate and what do they stop over from. Now, you'll be surprised to know this is a bird of a size of a sparrow, as big as this bird. Thanks to, again, Caleb, who took me to Botanical Garden in Chibubur. And this bird is called Mugimaki flycatcher. Mugimaki is a Japanese word. Mugimaki means the wheat, I think, the seeds of the wheat, I think, something like that. So this feeds on the seeds of the wheat. So they actually breed, as in they give birth to the babies, or they lay eggs in Siberia and northeastern China, which is extremely cold places. And then they migrate through the China, and then they come back into Japan during spring and autumn because it's nice there. And then during winter, when Japan gets colder, Siberia gets colder, and North and Eastern China gets very cold, they come to Indonesia. How nice. So, but they don't come to the lower part of the Indonesia where there is warm, but they come to places like Puncak, and Puncak or Cibubur is chiller. So they find that nicer. But you need to understand, this is where the birding becomes exciting and interesting, because you need to know about the behavior of the bird, which one migrates when, and you need to read a lot about it so that you can go there at the time. I also take help of others, because it's not possible, humanly possible, to know where is a bird, a tiny bird of this size. So there are people who keep going, somebody who has been there. So this bird was shot in the botanical garden in Cibubur. Now, this makes it interesting, exciting, because you only get to see them during the winter in Indonesia, and they are migrants. This is another migrant. This is called lesser kestrel. This again comes from northern part of the Europe, and it comes down to India for a while it goes down all the way down south. Sometimes it goes down to Australia, sometimes it goes down to different part of the world. But this stayed in India for about 3-4 weeks. That's it. It was a stopover. Now imagine, in that stopover 4 weeks, you should sight the bird. And this was 900 kilometers for me. I had to drive down there. We drove down, we took the picture. We stayed there 2 nights. And again, the rules of the composition doesn't change, but sighting the bird, identifying the bird makes it extremely exciting and interesting, right? So this is a male lesser kestrel. This is a family of falcon, and it hunts and eats, and its hunting is phenomenal. So again, back to the behavior, it hovers on the sky like this, with its wings for about 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So you can take a picture of it also when it is hovering, but it hovers slightly higher, so it's hard to shoot well. And then it looks at the landscape, lay of the land. They have very sharp eyes, and they look at rodents. They look at small lizards and all. They dive. When they dive, the falcons are the fastest animals on earth. They travel at 340 kilometers per hour. They dive. So the actual, the prey doesn't have any chance of escape. So they catch it with their talons. The talons are very strong, and then carry them. So it's amazing to watch all of that. So not just birding, but you actually understand their behavior and what they do and how they do it, right? Now, again, another interesting thing about birding and the behavior and understanding the migration is also these are endemic. When I say endemic, they live in only one place. They don't live across. So this is in the Western Ghats of India. This was shot near Kandapur, which is the Western Ghats of Indian part, a place called Kulur. Now, this is a bird by name Greyheaded Bulbul. It looks pretty. It's very, very shy. They are threatened. The reason they are threatened is the Western Ghats are becoming warmer, and also there is less vegetation because they're cutting down the trees for a lot of things. So this is back to my earlier, the status of the bird in terms of their conservation. This is threatened. So it's important, if you're a birder, try and look for birds which are in a different status, so you can build awareness, spread awareness, and also stop if there is any. If you see this bird in a cage, you can go and tell that person not to cage this bird. There is a bird called Bali Maina. I didn't put that in this presentation. There are only about 100 birds in the world now in wild. So that's bad. So that's the kind of things we should avoid, because in Indonesia, that is heavily traded and it's an expensive bird as well. Now, this is another critically endangered bird. This was shot in Jakarta, the Bay Area, high sea. We took a boat and went in here. Again, this is shot in the early mornings. So this is a bird called Christmas Island frigate bird. Can you beat it? It's a bird name itself is Christmas Island frigate bird. So there is a place called Christmas Island, and they were actually originated from there. This is a bird called frigate bird. The frigate bird has got a wide wingspan, right? Almost 2 meters, 80 to 90 inches.
And they don't take off from the ground because their body is heavier than their wings. So they can't take off that easily. So they normally sit on branches and then they, hover around. The male has a red pouch. This is a female with 2 juveniles. So the reason I'm giving you all this details about birding is you need to know the bird you're going to shoot. You need to know how they will behave when you go close to them. They're going to run away? Well, how close can you get to? So because this is juvenile and we were in the sea, like any other people who are fishing, they were not threatened. So we went pretty close to this bird. I would say we were almost about 20 feet away from this bird. And we were shooting from the moving boat. So this is a wonderful experience, I would say. Again, it gives this bird so there is no rule of third here. If you notice, you need to break the rule. It doesn't necessarily mean everything has to be rule of third. But here there is a story. The 2 juveniles are playing around and the mother is watching. Mother is not at all worried, but I think she's trying to say something, don't play around. The way they were playing is that pole, they were alternating who would sit on that pole. So we watched that for a while, actually. It was fantastic to watch, Sometimes you don't even need to shoot. You can just sit. If you are a good birder, most of them don't take photos or photographs. They just watch the bird. There are a lot of people that call themselves birders, and it is an amazing. And the scientific word for birding is ornithology. And ornithology is about birds migration, bird names, and also their behavior and everything else, right? And their conservation and all that. So an amazing topic to get through. I would encourage and I would recommend everybody to do some bit of birding. It's an amazing world out there. Now, obviously, it's hard. It's not easy. Now, this is shot in Raghunan Zoo. Can you beat it? This is a kingfisher, right? This is called blue-eared kingfisher. Now, blue-eared kingfisher has a very specific behavior. They get their head always like this. Their body is still. I don't know that you've seen. These days, you get all of this in WhatsApp, but I'm sure you would have seen this bird. But what is the critical thing about this is the bird normally dives, takes a fish, and then just pops it out and eats it off. But in this case, we managed to get this image sitting on a stick. I talked about using the lines. You can see the line of the stick is going from the corner to the corner. That's a composition piece and 1/3. But the behavior of the bird is it had a nest. Now the nest is done in a mud, and the nest is about 10 feet inside. And then there is an egg and there is a baby. I'm sure the nest is the eggs had hatched. So the kingfisher was taking food to the baby. So it would eat. It will catch. It will come sit here. It will observe for about 10 seconds, 5 seconds. No threat. It will dive right into the hole where the baby, it has laid its egg and the babies are staying. Now, the behavior is, as I said, is very critical. So we knew I had learned about it. I know the behavior. So we waited. We said, if there is a water, it will come back to the water to get the fish. So we waited near the water. We also waited near, we thought you can't sometimes figure out where the nest is because it's very hard, especially the kingfisher nests are. So we waited somewhere where it was flying. Then we went and waited there. And to our luck, we had to wait. It's not like the birding is not about, it happens, you go there and you get an image immediately. So we had to wait for about a couple of hours. And then this bird came in. So every 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, it comes and feeds the baby, basically. So that's the trend, or that's the pattern it has, right? So one needs to understand that and then get that whole thing going. So it has a fish in its mouth, and it stood there for 5-6 seconds, good enough for me to take an image, and then it went in. If we were to stay there, this next round, it will come back again, maybe an hour later, and you can take the picture. Now, obviously, people don't post the nest photos and people with the babies and all because they become vulnerable. So you normally don't post the babies. Another behavioral shot. This is interesting. This is a great barbet shot in Himalayas, foothills of Himalayas. And this was shot with I knew that it was coming and diving into the water, and it was taking shower, and it would come back on a tree and then shake it up. And when it shakes up, you have a story, right? Look at the water all over it, and then the feathers all, glittered. This bird has about 7 colors on its whole body, 7 or 8 colors. Can you beat it? If you just look at it, you can make out, right? There is brown, black, yellow, there is red, and there is green. There is, all colors, it's every year out there. So it's a pretty big bird and very, very colorful. And I wanted some action, and I said, okay, let me try this. And then I tried this, and it worked out. So I was waiting for it to come and jump after the shot. I also have a sharp shot, but then I thought this was, so knowing the behavior is very, very important in a birding. Another one where a raptor is caught a mouse or a rat, and then we knew that it would catch, it will fly from there, and it will not eat where it is caught, right? So it held it in its talons, it flew, and it went and landed right on a branch. And we slowed down our vehicle. We were in a Jeep. This was in Nagarhole forest. We slowed down our Jeep and we waited for where it will go and settle. And it settled down. We allowed it to have a bit of a meal, and then we slowly approached in our vehicle, and we went close to it. In fact, I went so close that I don't have the full bird. So this is again a misnomer. I said you can't clip off a part of the body of the bird, right? But because of the action and because of what you see, right, it's okay to go away from the normal rule, right? So this is sitting on a branch and ripping apart I have the next image, which is even more gory. It has the intestine and all, so I didn't want that gory to be shown. So I have a series of the images of this, some hundreds and hundreds of images. The next story is about feeding. Again, the bird, whenever you see a small juvenile or a baby bird, you can wait there, because you're for sure there is a papa or a mama coming to feed, right? So wait there, and sometimes you have to wait for hours. We have done that. I was in Cambodia, and this was in Malaysia, one of the forests in Malaysia. This we had to wait for about an hour and a half too. In fact, we did not realize that it was such a wet land. We had leeches in our legs, actually, by the time we were shooting. We didn't realize. So you have to have patience. You have to have awareness of the environment and how the behavior of the bird is, right? So now coming into looking at our own concept of composition and also exposure, right? How do you get a bird in flight, or how do you make that the freeze a frame, which is when it is in moment? Obviously, this is not going to sit like this for a while, right? This is split second. Now, if you notice this bird, this is a Capsian tern. This was shot in Kundapur near Mangalore in Karnataka. We were in the boat and we were really low down, as in eye level. So if you look at it, there are 3 things which matter here. One is I've got the bird in the eye level. The second one is I have to have a very fast shutter, really fast shutter, so that I can freeze it, focus, completely sharp. And I have to have the right light. So the light was falling on the bird. So this one also, if you notice, I have shot it at a very high ISO, 2000 ISO. This was shot as 1/2000, which means 1/2000th of a second, I've frozen the picture. That's a shutter speed. The latest cameras can go up to 1/8000 now. So one of the camera I have can take pictures 14 frames in 1 second. 1 second, I can take 14 frames. So depending on the gears and all that. So, but this is an example of how you actually have to freeze a moving bird, and you need to get that bird in sharpness and then in a thing. Now, the other side of it is also low light, and also how do you actually manage the light you have in front of you. This is a falcon, red-necked falcon. This was shot in Maharashtra, big one. Again, we drew down there. This bird is again a migratory bird, and this was at 6 p.m. You will not notice that this is literally almost no light, right? And I was shooting at a very high ISO, and I was sure. We approached it. We took some shots. We went closer in the vehicle. We went further closer in the vehicle. We went further closer in the vehicle. We were almost about 30 feet away from this bird. The reason I could do that is I understand the behavior of the bird, which is it is sitting on its one leg. Do you notice that it is sitting on a one leg? And that one leg means it is resting. It is at peace. It is actually conserving energy. So the birds, now onwards, if you notice, if any bird is sitting on its one leg, it basically means it is conserving energy and it is actually resting. Now, after a couple of hours, it will switch its legs and then move to another leg and then rest the other leg. So basically in the night when they sleep, if they are some of the tall birds, basically stand on one leg. It's one of the other behavior of the birds. If you know that they're at rest, they're not going to fly, you can go closer to the bird. Yeah. How are we doing on time? We've got less than 10 minutes to go, right? Or Miss Kusuma?
Carry on, Arunavre.
Okay, sure. Right. So back to the shutter and the composition and the expression of an animal, a bird. This is what makes it very, very exciting. This bird was taking shower. This is Baya weaver. You may have noticed this is a bird which actually weaves. This is the one which does all the nest, which are very, very pretty. The most scientific way they build that. But this is a male, and this is in its breeding plumage. What does the breeding plumage means? It is about to attract a female to mate. So it is in all colors, brilliant yellow, and it displays its, the nature actually gives it yellow so that it can actually attract a female and has babies. So now all of the animals and the birds do that basically. And interestingly, like everywhere else, even in human, the men are the ones who have to struggle for the female. So the men are the male birds are prettier, but even then they have to attract the female and then mate. So this bird was taking shower. The reason I chose this bird to to explain to you is that this obviously is a bird which is taking shower. I need to get the action, which is its movement. I want to give that story of it's taking shower, but I wanted to freeze the bird, as in I wanted to make sure that the bird is sharp. All the features of the bird, the beak and the color and the wings are visible. So it was a bit of a struggle, but I managed to get it. So if you notice, this is shot at 1/4000 of a second. 1/4000 of a second, this bird is frozen. And then the key thing is to get the focus correct. So get the focus on the bird because it's moving. The second, get your settings right, and then try and shoot it. So this is shot at 600 mm, which is, this is not very close. This is quite far, but it was one of the images I made, and I'm quite happy with that, right? Again, another one in flight. And if you notice, I've blurred the entire background, and it was landing, and I had to take a picture of it landing. This is a plum-headed parakeet. This was shot in one of the other, forests in Karnataka. I just move on to identification. Then the other biggest challenge in birding is identifying a bird, which is male, which is female. What type of a bird is this? There are ways to identify that. Now, I'm pretty sure, I know I will be unpopular by saying this, but in this, the red beak one is the one more prettier one, right? Rather than the black beak one, right? And then the red beak one is the male, and then the black beak one is the female. And this is a Malabar blue-winged parakeet, right? So there are ways to identify the birds, and it's actually very interesting to note, and you will notice as we go through, there are very few birds where the female is prettier than the male. This is the only, humans are the only, away from the rule of thumb where I think the females are more prettier than the men, right? So that's how I consider that. But anyway, jokes apart, in the birds, the males are always prettier, normally bigger, unless it is a raptor, the females are bigger, but the males are still prettier. Now, this is shot in the foothills of Himalayas, again, to give you a comparison of male and female. This is called college peasant, and there are no prizes for guessing which one is a male, right? The bigger and the prettier one, which is on the right, this one, the blue color one is a male. You can make out that when you see these birds, if you don't know, you will notice that these two are different birds, but they are not. They're the same bird. One is male, another one is a female. And only when you understand, observe, and then probably read and know more about that, then you will actually get to know that this is a male and this is a female. This is once again, this is called college peasant from foothills of Himalaya. This is shot in a place called Satal. Now, I'll just jump straight down into, I know in conscious of time as well. So what is that in birding you can do and you don't do, right? The first and the foremost thing, I'm sure all of you notice, I'm wearing a camouflage, right? You are in their habitat. You are in the forest. So make sure you are first, remember that you are in a forest and it is vulnerable because that is not our native place to live. There are all kinds of animals and raptors and reptiles, snakes and everything else, and also thorns and some of the poisonous plants are there. So make sure you remember that you are in their habitat. Blend in the nature. I talk about camouflage, but there is also other two things. Sometimes I've experienced this firsthand where I'm not wore a full pant and I've had thorns sticking to my legs and it won't go for weeks because it's a poisonous thorn. So always wear full pant. Always wear a shoe if you're going into the forest. The reason being, you never know what insect is there. If there can be a wasp or it can be a bee or it can be a snake. If it bites, you don't know what it is. If you can't ID the snake, you will panic. Is it something poisonous, right? So always wear something, covering your toes and the entire leg as much as possible. Talked about leaving early in the morning. Most of my day starts at 3:30 a.m. and I'm with the camera. So I get a good night's sleep. So I sleep early in the evening. I'm hoping that it is, at the same time, there is no alcohol. Try and avoid alcohol. So I don't drink or if it's a situation a couple of days before so that I'm fresh. You need to be really high on focus. Patience is a key thing for birding. It's not easy. You can't get birds in all the time. So there's also another thing which I talk about is experience is important and disappointments are normal. Don't believe that every time you go out you get a bird. No, there have been many cases where I've not got a bird. Before you visit any place, talk to people around, do research. Now, always there is so much in the internet. Figure out what birds are available there. Look at those birds. So in the forest, in the field, it is easy to identify, quick to see them. The moment you see them, okay, this is a green bee eater or whatever that is, right? Always carry a binocular because most of the birds, don't sit close to you. So you need to slowly approach them. There is a thumb rule in birding, which is you see the bird before bird sees you. If the bird sees you, they'll fly away. If you see the bird, you have a chance to take a picture or identify the bird, right? Again, I talked about disappointments. You should be prepared for disappointments. Not all field trips yield results, right? Carry enough water because it can be dehydrating. The dry deciduous forest in India, where I go many a times, can be very, very dry. And then by afternoon, you're really thirsty and you're, looking for water. Carry some small sweet or sugar or whatever it is, because sometimes you need immediate energy. You feel tired, you can't go anywhere. Coming back to the base can take a while. So try and be prepared, right? Most of the time I do this personally, and I've seen people who taught me, people who are around me who are even better birders than me. We shoot all the birds and we ID all the birds. You never know, you can get a special bird. This is a common bird, this is a sparrow I've always shot, I don't want to shoot. Don't do that, because within sparrow there are many sparrows. There is a tree sparrow, there is a house sparrow, there is Russell sparrow. You never know what you've got, so you better shoot, keep shooting, and also ID the bird. And this is one fundamental rule in, that's why I've highlighted it, is experience of birds. And you don't get experience by just going there and sitting quiet. So talk to people, understand, make sure that, you draw from others' experience, ask questions. Why is this did not come? Why did bird did not show up? What is there any behavior I'm missing? And I think the last thing is have fun, right? Always, if you don't have fun, you don't enjoy it, right? This is birding I'm talking about. Now, coming into what is that you don't do is, in the birding, I don't even own a flash, actually. That's how bad it is. So we don't use flash at all. It's always no flash photography, because the birds get scared. Even in the wildlife, this is true for wildlife completely. Any animal, they'll charge at you. If you flash at an animal like elephant or a tiger, they'll charge at you. They think that this is a subject which is threatening me. So never ever use a flash. Even if you're doing, like in a normal photography with your phone or iPhone or a Android phone, switch off the flash. That flash is something which distorts your image completely. In birding specifically, we avoid perfumes because the birds and reptiles and even the snakes and all are very sensitive to smell. So you don't want to give them a feeling that there is an intruder in the forest, right? So never wear perfumes. Silence is pretty critical. I talked about alcohol. Mobile phone. I normally don't talk to my family from the morning till the evening. I keep it in silent. I don't think we need phones in there unless we are shooting in the phone. But try and switch off the phone. No mobile is good, but silent mode is always respected. Also, the people around you would respect it. So, and sometimes people chase the bird, right? Some people go that side, chase the bird. They'll come here, and those are all the silly tricks, and it's not worth it. And also in the forest, it's sometimes very, very dangerous. That's the next bullet point. Many times there are words saying restricted area, don't enter, private property. Be very conscious of it. Don't try and go into somebody's place. Or sometimes in the forest, they say restricted area means it is restricted. They know that there is something there. There could be a danger out there. The last one is the rule nest I talked about. Never ever shoot a nest. You can shoot a nest, but never reveal the location because it can be vulnerable to the bird. Somebody can, a lot of poachers are there these days. They'll come and catch the bird, and they're highly vulnerable when there are babies out there. So never ever post. So most of the social media, which actually where the recordings are recorded, the location of the bird nesting is not done. If you put a bird with a nesting, they will ask you to delete it because it's not allowed as a thumb rule that you should not post it there. So that's where I come to with the birding. Now this is the last, maybe 2 minutes or so, Ms. Kusuma and Amtika, is that okay? 2-3 minutes, then we can wind up, right? How much time more do we have? I think we are overshot. I've overshot already, right? Right. So the photography. Yeah, sorry.
Please go ahead for another 5 minutes, maybe.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Princess. Right. So I shoot all my images in RAW. And now, people who are not familiar with the word RAW means it's a file which is uncompressed, unprocessed in their original digital format, which means all the pixels are as is, as it was shot. Now, most of the time you notice you get JPEGs. JPEG is probably the worst thing to shoot, especially for wildlife or any genre of photography, because it is a compression. JPEG is a type of compression. It compresses the image to what its original algorithm is. It's not an algorithm, we have defined it. It has its own algorithm. So it will compress it. So don't shoot with JPEG because then you lose the ability to process it. It's like a negative in the film world, right? Where you take the original image and you can process it to your advantage, the way you want it, right? it preserves all the data, whereas it's called, hexadata. So it retains all the information in each of the pixels. So you can actually process it to bring out the best in that image, right? And also if you have shot it low light, high, extra light, and different forms of light factor, there are challenges in the field. You always have to accept that, but you can fix that in the post processing. In the processing, you can fix that. Each of these cameras come with, the latest cameras, most of the DSLRs come with the formats. There are many softwares which does it. Adobe has got a Photoshop, Lightroom, Luminary AI, Aurora. Even in the phone these days, that there is a way to process, right? You can edit the picture, you can increase the aperture, you can reduce the light, you can increase the contrast and all that. That's a basic processing. But the unfortunate thing is, in the phone, it is doing on a compressed JPEG file image, while you have an opportunity in a digital camera to shoot raw, right? Just to give you an idea of what a processing does, right? I have not done anything to the bird, okay? I've not changed the bird. I've shot it like the way it is on the left side. It was a little harsh light. It was at 11ish or so, I think, 10:30, 11ish. Light was very harsh. So you can see you can't see the details of the bird, can you, in the first image, right? Now, obviously, you are trying to say, I want to see the bird. I want to see the bird come out cleanly, right? So I have composed it right. I've got the bird image composition right on the field, but I've not got the light right. And I've not got some of the colors are not visible. And also, if you notice, there is a small shrub here, which was sticking out, and it was disturbing the bird actually. It was not giving the right thing. So what I did, I processed it. I reduced the light in the processing. I got rid of the shrub. If you can notice here, the shrub is taken out, right? There's no shrub there, right? Number two. And then also I've brought the details out in the wings, and the bird is visible now. And I have not changed anything to the bird. And at the end of it, the background in this is a little more blurry. I mean, there are grains. I just cleaned the background. I made it flat. That's it. Now, I just did that, and now look at how the bird looks. It looks very different, right? I'm sure you would want to see a bird which is better saturated. We call it in the word saturation means better color, right color than this. And this is how the real bird is actually, if you really look at it, right? So that's the processing piece. So you can go on and on and on about processing. Each of the topics I talked about, we can spend hours on it, basically, right? I've tried to, this is a beginner course, I've tried to cover it. Now, the processing, another interesting thing, right? I don't know whether you understand. This is a star trail. This was done in Ladakh, Miss Kusuma, to your point earlier. We had to focus our camera to the North Star. And then this was shot over 3 hours, 2.5 hours, 300 images. And I've merged all 300 images. This is only possible with photo processing. Difficult to do it in the camera. Yeah, and possible because of the digital images you have. Now, obviously, each star has moved about 2.5 hours. You can see the lines, and that's how you merge them all and make an image which looks exciting and fantastic. And there was a village at the down, which has always come out nice and neat. So this is what a processing does. Processing is not to alter the original image, not to change the subject, not to give a different perspective, but to make sure that you bring out the best in the image, right? Yeah, this is multi-exposure merged actually. So I come to the summary at the end, and right, first and the foremost thing, how to hold a camera. Try and look at and hold the camera. So a lot of people hold it like this and all, but holding it is very, very critical. Start shooting raw. I talked about exposure. Understand their exposure component. Try as many as possible, and delete them if required. So don't worry. In the cameras, digital cameras these days, you have aperture, shutter, and manual modes. Try all of them. Don't stick to auto. If you want to stick to auto, you didn't need to buy a DSLR. So please don't do that. And then bigger and wider aperture for birds and portraits. So use bigger apertures as much as possible, f2, f2.8, f4, depending on the type of lens you have. And then as the landscape, try and reduce it to f10, f11, f12 in the aperture that helps you. Increasing the ISO, many people think it will increase the noise. Don't worry, the digital cameras can have, manage that. So try that. Make a habit of checking what is my setting, ISO is what. So a lot of times in the field, you keep changing, so you don't know that. So keep checking the image, keep checking the settings. But at the end of the day, enjoy what you want to do. And this is obviously about birding, but I would say the same thing irrespective of what genre you choose. Enjoy it, and really put your heart and soul into it, and then you'll really get some fantastic results, right? With that, is there any question? Avtika, would you be able to help me with that? Is there any question? Oops.
Any question in the comment section? Yet no question is there, but yes, everyone has enjoyed the session, seeing all these comments.
Right. I'm trying to read the comment now.
Yeah,
I think it was so comprehensive that people have no questions to ask.
No, Arun sir, from birding to that astrophotography, probably that circle thing, what you have done, and in Leh Ladakh region, how do you? It's a transformation. Probably, I don't know. It's a different photography, or how it is.
It is certainly, Upin sir, it's an amazing new world. We had to get up at middle of the night, 12:30, because the moon was only going to set at 12:30. So first and the foremost thing for astrophotography is to understand the light again. We don't need so much light in astrophotography because you keep the exposure open for a long time. So we had to get up late in the night, and we had to set up our camera. It was sub-zero, cold. We had to wear a glove, and you couldn't operate the camera. So that's about harshness in the conditions piece. From an understanding the photography piece, we had done a lot of homework in terms of how to shoot, but also we had one guide who was helping us. One of our friends was helping us. So it's a completely different world, right? I carry a lens which is about 5 kilos, right? 600 mm lens. But here I was carrying a wide angle lens, which was only this big, but it had to capture the whole sky. So it's an amazingly different world. Am I drawn into it? The answer is yes. Am I going to leave birding? The answer is no. So I think birding is still going to be my passion number one. But yes, wherever we get, there is an opportunity to do. Unlike birding, the astrophotography requires a lot of preparation. You cannot shoot in cities like Jakarta, Bangalore. A lot of noise in terms of light. So there is a light noise, which is every light will distort how the sky looks in the night. The camera cannot capture it. It thinks there is a light here also. So you have to have absolutely no pitch dark, no light on around, and then shoot the astro. So it's a new thing for me. That was my first attempt, in fact. So I don't claim to have any big knowledge. That's why I didn't want to get into it. But I wanted to show it from a processing perspective, how I enjoyed it. I've also done some other processing of landscape with stitching 7 images and all that. It was fun. It was really fun. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Aruna, I was looking forward to some Leh Ladakh photos.
Sure. I will certainly. How do I can put it on? Is there a page for the JNICC? I can post it in there if it is Facebook or a thing.
Yes, we do have Embassy Facebook. I'll send you the link.
Sure. Hello, sir. I have somebody has raised a hand actually.
Okay.
Hi, Arun, Ramesh from Jakarta. How are you doing, man?
Good afternoon, sir. I'm doing fantastic. I'm really honored and appreciate you attending this session, sir. Thank you.
No, not at all. It's your session, and I always appreciate your work. Fantastic presentation. Only thing is, okay, for a beginner or a learner, we need to understand more a bit. It's on YouTube, so we will go through and understand and learn. I mean, I also like to learn about photography.
Fantastic.
But one thing I want to say, you have given a very detailed presentation, a lot of pictures which we can't see otherwise. I mean, your work has always been fantastic. And one new thing which I've learned or something interesting I saw is birds showering. Shower the birds every day. They shower, I suppose.
Yes, they shower twice a day sometimes, but once for sure in the afternoon. They always shower. Yes, sir. Yes,
okay, so that's a learning for us. Thank you. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Arun sir. Thank you.
Thank you all.
It was really good, sir. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Great, Mari.
If there are no further questions, I would like to
excellent session.
conclude. Yeah, it has indeed been a very interactive session, I must say. And looking at the comments, and everyone looks so interested. So once again, I would like to thank you, Mr. Samak, and I would like to thank all these attendees who attended the session. It was simple yet very detailed. I knew a few things, and I came to know about a lot of new things.
Yeah.
So, and maybe we can request JNICC to, make this introduction to birding version 2.0 next time.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I have some of my work in this place, so feel free, and you may all reach out to me on my email or anywhere. Happy to answer any question, and love to see more people in the forest, following the passion of birding or wildlife. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Samak. It was indeed a great session, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Arun, your photographs still adorn the walls of the embassy.
Oh, thank you very much, ma'am. I'm honored. I'm really honored. This session wouldn't have been possible but for Miss Kusma. Fantastic. Thank you very much for encouraging me, giving the last mile encouragement. Sometimes we miss, right, as artists, right? So thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I'm more than happy to support. And, I can, if you want Ladakh pictures to be up there, happy to send you. You can print it up, then put it them as well. I'd love to do that.
Or we can do another session about Ladakh.
I would love to do that. It would be an amazing.
If you think we have enough for half an hour or 45 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. No, we have plenty to talk about, right? So definitely.
Okay.
Depends on how deep one wants to go, but certainly there is more than enough from a preparation perspective, and it'll be very interesting. Love to share what I have learned.
Thanks a ton, Arun, for taking time out. And
there is a gentleman by name Sharan who has got his hands up.
Okay.
Sharan?
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Hello, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Sharan. Thanks.
Okay, your presentation was excellent. So the basic thing is we need to stick to the basics of photography.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in the next session that the photography, when we capture the photos, the next crucial thing is how to process the photos is important, I think.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Two things: composition. How do you compose an image? How do you tell a story? Once you have taken an image, then you can process it if it requires enhancements.
Yeah, I mean, like to processing, you should have some basic, means what we need to increase, what we need to decrease, certain things.
Someone's mic is unmuted. Request if it can be muted, please.
Sure.
Okay,
sure. Thank you. No, reach out to me if you want to. I'm more than happy to help in any way. We can have another session on just processing also. That's another vast subject, but happy to.
Yeah, basics of the processing will be very helpful.
Yeah, can be done.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Arun, sir. Really
Thanks,
fantastic.
Jai Kumar sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate you joining as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you very much, all the attendees.
Yeah.
Thank
this
you.
Is the Ladakh picture. Multi-exposure, 6 images being stitched together.
Amazing. Wow.
God,
Yeah.
such an awesome
Is this a lake,
picture.
sir? Is it a lake one?
It is a lake one. This is not the Pangong Lake, but some other lake. But this is one of the lake on the way we were going. Yeah, this is 6 images. So you take one image at a time, and then you stitch them together to get the real view.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mountains encircling the lake.
Yeah. Okay. If there's no other further questions, thank you very much once again, Kusuma and Avantika. Thank you for hosting me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Samat.
Thank you.
Pleasure is indeed ours. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Arunare. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And this.
Thank you, Kusumaji, for organizing this.
Thank you, Ramesh ji. Thank you. I had seen Mr. Samat's presentation last year. I was so impressed. He sort of motivated quite a few to turn to birding last year.
Okay.
You know?
Right.
But
Very
of
nice.
course, I think all of us didn't succeed as much, but it stayed with me, his presentation. Glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, we definitely. We learned photography. He's created interest for learning photography.
Very true. Very true.
Okay. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Aziz?
Yes, madam.
You can
Finish.
close it now.
Okay.